Hi, I'm Frances Katzen, and welcome to my podcast, The World of Real Estate. In this series, we will explore the world's largest asset class and how it plays out on a global scale. I'm so excited to welcome Joshua Chaffin, an incredibly talented journalist and the New York correspondent for the Financial Times, focusing on business, economics, and real estate. Chaffin is an accomplished and in-the-know reporter who has been at the publication for over 20 years, working and reporting in cities from New York, Washington, D.C., to Mexico City, Brussels, and London. Chaffin's impressive career has taken him around the world. Welcome. We first met before COVID during a luxury real estate tour in an SUV around Tribeca, remember?
We did, I do.
And for a new development story you were working on. And so much has shifted in the market since then.
Just a bit.
Just a bit. Joshua, I'm delighted to have you join me today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's dive in, shall we?
Let's do it.
How would you describe yourself?
Somebody called me debonair the other day, which was the first time that had ever been applied to me. But I'm gonna keep it. I'll go with that.
I like it.
So,
where did you grow up, Josh?
I grew up in Newton, which is a suburb just outside of Boston.
Did you like it?
You know, I go back now. My father's still there, and I think it's the most lovely place. And beautiful leafy streets and old houses and so forth, and great schools. And it would, now that I have kids, I think it would be the absolute ideal place to be. But I was kind of dying to get out of it as a kid. And I thought it was endlessly boring and not so wonderful.
Not cultural enough for you?
I don't know. I guess as a kid, you just want to
move. The
suburbs just kind of, they don't do it for you.
What were your hopes and ambitions growing up?
I don't know that I had very clear. I think I always loved writing and traveling. And I was worried about, but also hopeful about, is there a way to make this into a career, into a job? So I would say that was the closest thing after I realized I wouldn't be a professional athlete in any way, which was relatively early, but I would say that.
Where were your parents from, and what were their professions?
My father grew up actually in Newton. His family his parents were Russian Jewish, or I guess now it would be Ukrainian Jewish immigrants. And my mother's family was from a very kind of working class Irish Italian part of Boston. And she was a nurse, and they actually met when she was caring for my grandfather, who was very ill at the time. So they were sort of an unlikely match from two, very different Boston worlds. And yielded this.
They should be proud. How did you get into journalism?
I wasn't sure that I wanted to be a journalist.
What?
I sort of backed into it in a way. I had an internship when I was in college at the local bureau for the New York Times, and it was great. The people were wonderful, and it was interesting. They let me do research and call people up and interview them and so forth, and sort of hand them little files that I'd done. And I thought, well, this is good. But for some reason, I thought I was going to go to law school because I couldn't really think of anything else. And I knew that I liked to travel and I liked to write. And I thought I would be some sort of international lawyer, whatever that was. And I worked briefly in a law firm, and I absolutely hated it. And I was basically doing filing and data entry all day. And I was also absolutely terrible at it. And I screwed up, anyway, it was terrible. And just sort of the things that I'm worst at, sitting at a desk and, inputting numbers. So I quickly decided that journalism was actually great. And these people were actually really wonderful and smart and decent and fun. And I ended up getting a job soon after that at a kind of startup magazine. And that was how I started.
You have been working at the Financial Times since 2002. How has your career evolved from then to now?
Oh my goodness. I don't even know if it's evolved. I feel like I just keep. God, it must have.
I think so. A couple of books under your belt, too.
I think How has it evolved? Well, I've certainly gotten to see some different places. I've written about business, and I've done political coverage. I covered the Greek crisis, and when that was happening, from Brussels and from Athens and from other places. I've covered U.S. elections and campaigns. I've covered a lot of white-collar crime and scandals and court trials. I was actually most recently, or fairly recently, I covered the Ghislaine Maxwell trial which is part of the Epstein saga.
What a saga.
I think I'm still a reporter, basically, but I think hopefully I'm better at it, after 20 years of doing it. And maybe my ambitions are a little bit higher in terms of the stories that I want to write.
What has cultivated in your writing from being in it that long? I mean, what has become much more clear to you in your journalism?
I would say on the writing, one of the best things I did, I worked as an editor in London for a few years. And it's something that a lot of people, if you stay at the FT long enough, they usually will ask you to work on one of the news desks as an editor. So you sort of switch sides. And a lot of people resist it because you want the freedom of being a reporter. You want your name out there. You want to write what you want to write. Being an editor was actually a lot of fun, a lot of camaraderie. The newsroom in London is just amazing. It feels like the kind of crossroads of the world, and you have people with expertise and all sorts of things all kind of thrown together, making this. I would say making this paper. Now I would say making this, digital news report. But in terms of the writing, you end up seeing so much copy and so many stories from other people. You really begin to, at first you think, I have no business editing this. And then pretty soon, I think you can diagnose quickly in a lot of cases what's wrong with this, like move the nut graph up or shorten the lead, or this color doesn't, I guess it must be like a doctor in in an emergency room and just seeing 50 people a day for a couple of years and saying, that's a flu, that's a cold, that's.
So you can now see in your writing how you would want to tweak it too, I would imagine, based on seeing others.
Yeah, and it's almost inevitably cutting it back and being more precise
Clear.
And more concise, and which is a kind of endless exercise for everybody.
Yeah. The clarity is the hard part, right? There's so much coming up. How did you get people to take you seriously during the initial stages of your career?
I don't know that I did.
You're so self-effusive.
I looked pretty young for my age. And back then, at least when I joined the FT, I remember, everybody wore a suit and tie. It was that era of New York. And I think that made me look like I was 12. And I was writing about financial markets, which I knew almost nothing about. And so I did not have a lot of authority. And when I think back to sort of the, my earliest days, that was as a journalist, that was challenging. But I think if you work hard, if you try to be prepared, all those things, I think that comes across. If you're kind of serious about the work, then I think people recognize that when they're dealing with you. And even if you're young and, they have to make allowances for you. But I think if they at least sense that you are serious about it, then that kind of goes some way.
You're being very gracious, but I'm sure it also had to be good, not just conscientious. I'm sure the work itself spoke volumes and penetrated many judgments to get you to the next level.
It was extraordinary work. When I think the first thing I did, what was it? God, I wrote like I wrote this column called High Net Worth, and it was all about things that sort of ultra wealthy people should be doing or investing in, or which was, beyond absurd for a guy in his 20s who lived in a shared rent stabilized apartment, and but I was the high net worth guy for a bit.
Well, you fooled them.
Oh, sure.
You lived in Mexico City before joining Financial Times. So we've spoken about how that all came to be based on your position with the smaller paper. You speak English, Spanish, and some French. You learned Spanish where?
I studied it growing up, and then I spent a semester in Chile in college, and then I worked in Mexico City for a couple of years.
And what about French?
I tried. We went to Brussels for 5 years, and I thought, I speak pretty good Spanish. I'm sure I'll just sort of pick up French, or I can just kind of fake it. And I discovered, I don't know if it was because I was older, because we had our kids there, and I had a new job, and I really, the last thing I wanted to do was go through a textbook or go to early morning language classes. But I don't know, my wife sort of makes fun of me for speaking this made up, utterly bogus romance language, where if we were ever in Italy or France, or I just kind of
I'm the same.
start sort of spouting things that, it doesn't usually work that well, but
the fact that you try, I think, is a big one. You have reported for the Financial Times while living in New York, Washington, D.C., Brussels, London. Which city left the biggest impact on you?
I think I loved, Brussels was not always easy or fun, or, and you're not just in Brussels, but you're in the kind of EU expat bubble within Brussels, which is even a stranger place. But as a kind of jumping off point for Europe, that was absolutely wonderful. And I really enjoyed that a lot.
I love Brussels.
We arrived in London, and we just kind of loved it. Everybody loved it. I loved it. My wife loved it. My kids had a great time. So I had a really interesting job. That was probably the place where everybody was happy and fulfilled and so forth. And I just adore London.
Is it hard? Was it hard to move?
It was hard to move. Our visa ended, and and it couldn't be renewed. And that,
Bummer.
I sort of think if that hadn't happened, we would have just kept extending it kind of year by year until eventually we, realized that we were proper.
Expats.
Yeah, and that our kids were, I guess, Londoners.
How do you go about finding a lead for a story, Josh?
I don't know. There's some things are just obvious news, and they happen, and they, we just cover them. The Fed announcing interest rates, or a big, the State of the Union speech, or what have you. Then the other side of it is the journalist trying to come up with ideas and pitching them to editors, and so much of it is talking to people, sometimes traveling. It depends on what your beat is and what you're covering, but you're always trying to develop ideas. And the worst thing is when you feel like you're sort of in this kind of idea famine, and you just think there's just nothing I want to write about, New York real estate at the moment. I've just, I've done the story about the collapse. I've done the, this, that, whatever. And I just can't think of anything else, and it's just not enthusing me. So you really need to kind of keep your head in it, I guess, and keep talking to people, and keep sort of doing stuff that hopefully generates ideas. And if you don't, a wise boss had kind of said to me, if you don't come up with your own ideas, then the desk will force its ideas on you. So somebody will then
hammer it home.
Say, we have a great idea. Why don't you write about this? And you may be stuck with that. So
you try to be ahead of that curve, for sure.
Yeah.
what would you say is the most memorable real estate
Ooh.
story that you have covered? The crash.
I don't know. I'm trying to think. I think I find the developers fascinating as characters.
Oh,
And
they
so,
are.
Yeah. So I did a profile of Michael Stern of Billionaires Row.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And
Steinway.
I really enjoyed that.
What did you
And
enjoy about it?
I think usually if I want to do something, especially like a magazine length profile, you have to have a real curiosity about like who this person is, how do they do this, and how does it work? And I can't go in knowing the whole thing already, or it's just not very exciting or interesting and compelling. But he fascinated me as a guy who may be imperfect in certain ways and mysterious, but he really kind of helped me understand what it is to be a developer and all of these different wild skills that they need. Almost like like a producer of like a Hollywood blockbuster or something. And I think there's a
Never
certain
heard
amount
it
of
quite like that, but yeah.
I mean, there's the marketing, there's the financial stuff, there's the creativity. I think there's a certain amount of bullshitting all of
Yep.
these people to just keep the show on the road and keep it going. And then there's the selling the thing. And so I really enjoyed it. And that also coincided with the pandemic, this enormous blockbuster that they were producing, which was just yet another complication. So I thought that was great. And I wrote more recently about John Mechanic, the kind of famed New York real estate lawyer. And I thought a story about a New York real estate lawyer would be seemingly not very interesting, but actually I found him interesting and
Why?
because, well, I discovered that this guy is at the center of like every deal of consequence in New York City over the last, over decades. And so it told me something about the way that the commercial real estate business operates in the city. And he's an amazing character. And if you talk to him, I mean, he knows, like he points at every building on the skyline and says, oh, I did the refi for the grandfather, and then now the son owns it, and he's partners with the brother, who I'm also friends with, who owns that, So every one of these buildings is like a multi-generational family business story for him. And it kind of told me what a kind of small world this is that they operate in. And he's almost, he's kind of one guy at the center of it. Somebody it described him as if you have like two giant egomaniac billionaires trying to do a deal and somebody needs to get them in a room and kind of butt heads and make it happen, like he's the guy you call. So I thought that was
Wow.
interesting.
That's a role. Have you seen the New York City real estate landscape evolve from when you first arrived versus now?
I've only been back from London for, I guess, about 5 years now. So I can't say that it's changed dramatically. I know that I think the current crisis that we're in, I think how it comes out on the other side will be different. And I think there are already, people retiring, like, I don't know Darcy Stakem is leaving CBRE. She's sort of like one of the legends of if you need to sell a skyscraper, she's the queen of skyscrapers. So she's another character who's kind of dominated for decades. And she's sort of moving on in a way. And I've heard of partnerships breaking up. I mean, there's a lot of stress now. And a lot of people are just, I think, kind of fighting over how we divide the losses. And so I imagine this is a kind of period when people will, certain people will drift away. And I imagine as things come back, new fortunes will be made and new characters will emerge. And
It's Darwinism, isn't it? At its finest.
What do you think? I should ask you as the authority on these matters.
Said like a true journalist, it's about you today, Josh. No, I think we're going to see a metamorphosis, but I think if it was going to have ended, it would have ended literally during COVID. And I think that was the absolute stress test of a lifetime, in my opinion. And I think what we're seeing now is actually what should have probably happened after COVID. But we went to the upper denial, like full sugar high. And now we're sort of coming back to that evening and plateauing and trying to find the level. And I think when the Treasury yield dipped below 10%, dipped below 4% in December, we saw the 30-year literally drop from 8 down to 6.25. And now we've seen it go right back up as 10 basis points goes back up again. So I think it's doing this, but it will find its way back down.
One of my kids said last night, it's been 4 years since lockdown. We'd have to double check the date, but it must be like right around that time.
Yeah, March 13th or something.
Yeah, and it's kind of struck me that we've gone through this historic thing and then sort of bumped along through all these other crises and the turmoil of Trump and the rest of it, and in the business world, it's interest rates and now the uncertainty about the election. And I feel like we still haven't even like properly processed the pandemic. And it was
No,
an
it's like
extraordinary
denial.
thing, but it's just like we don't really have time. And yet it almost feels like this weird dream that didn't happen in a way. But it was a crazy thing. I'm sure at some point in 10 years, somebody will make a movie and we'll all recognize, what it was like. But
it's you just said it so aptly. I mean, that is exactly how it feels. It's sort of like we get it, but we don't fully take in and get it. That the world stopped, completely and utterly stopped, except for Amazon.
yes.
And the food. I mean, to me, that was the most fascinating thing I've ever seen. And how brave it was in my mind that they were doing that. Because without it, I think we'd really be in.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that. They must have been scared. I digress. No, you always take me down windy roads, don't you? Okay. You have written about topics from American politics to Brexit to murder trials. What is it like to cover controversial topics?
Like such as,
Well, you just did the Epstein trial with Delphine. I mean, like you cross into many different worlds.
right. That doesn't bother me very much. I like the fact that I have I think that's one of the great things about the FT is that you don't get a particular job covering the bond market and have to cover the bond market for the next 20 years unless you want to, and that's your specialty and you love it. But it really gives you the opportunity to see the world and see different industries. And so that, for me,
So what's resonated? Which ones do you really like out of all of the people and the politics and the real estate?
It's funny, I like something about all of them because I think I'm just
Open to-
curious and I like interesting people and I like places and I like, understanding where somebody came from and how that
the psychology of it.
affected them and how it all works. And yeah.
Have you ever received angry emails from readers who oppose your views, and how do you handle that?
The comments on our stories are, sometimes they're people, anyway, they're usually often littered with quite withering comments. So
You don't take it to heart.
I try not to. I think sometimes it's a little dispiriting. I think in the climate that we're in, when people accuse you of bias or something and they haven't really read the article, and it's actually pretty bland. That's kind of disappointing because you sort of feel like I actually take this pretty seriously, and it means something to me to try to do this in a fair and conscientious way. So that is, when people just sort of immediately accuse you of bias or partisanship or what have you, I do also sometimes think, wait a second, what if they're right? And actually, there was a guy who was a reader who we started to have sort of a pen pal relationship. I never met him, but he would sort of say, like, I read a couple of your pieces. I really liked them, but you just, like, this one was absolute.
Wow,
and
thanks.
You liberals just can't help yourselves. And I wrote back like a thoughtful note, like, what's going to happen? I'll just see what happens. And thanks for reading. Appreciate you reading the FT. And
Wow.
You're obviously a pretty engaged subscriber. I take your point about this. This is why I put it that way. I'll think about it. We started to have like regular, it's good to know, it's pretty easy, especially in New York, to write something critical of Trump and have a lot of people tell you that it was wonderful. But it may not be a great piece of journalism, including my father. It's good to have an idea that other people are reading you and are going to hold you to account, and just try to make sure that you're extra careful. I think the thing that really makes me uncomfortable, that I struggle with, is when you're writing about a person and if you're doing a profile, and I hate to be mean about people, which is, maybe it's like a weakness or a softness, but you also have to be truthful and accurate. And I think Joan Didion famously said something about, journalists having to have ice in their hearts, or some ice, because every now and then you have to
Call it.
stick the knife in. And yeah, I sort of like lose sleep over that. Would this upset somebody or not? I don't know. That's,
Wow.
yeah, I have to get over that and just,
I've not heard many people
stick the knife in.
just actually own that.
Just, yeah.
Oof.
Well, this stuff too, it'll be on the internet forever, and people's kids will read it. And
Wow.
if somebody
So there's a
writes
consequence to
something,
that.
like if you
But the
feel
fact that
someone's
you
mischaracterized
think that.
you
Correct.
in a gross way, and it's just going to be out there forever. And I think that really,
Has
wounds
weight.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are the latest projects you're working on, and what's in the pipeline?
I am shifting more to the U.S. election to help out our DC team on that. So I was in Northwest Georgia over the weekend at a Trump rally. So I'll be doing more stuff, I guess, in that direction. But I'm also still very interested in real estate and developers, and how this whole crisis, this kind of slow motion crisis, how it plays out.
Well, it's very interesting. We were predicting a surplus of new development inventory that would probably take at least, 3 to 7 years. And now we're finding that we're so tight on inventory, which tells me that we've started to absorb quite a bit, which is an interesting metrics.
I'm also fascinated by Miami and South Florida.
Yeah.
I've done a few pieces from there, but it just feels like this historic period of development that is kind of amazing to see, especially when you come from New York. And the characters there are extraordinary, and they're less filtered. So they'll really tell you what they do and how they do it. And I met this wonderful guy who is doing a huge condo development, which is based on the 11 nightclub. I don't know if you've heard of this nightclub.
Yes, I have heard of the. Yes. Where? In Tampa or?
No, in Miami.
Because there's one there already. 11.
Well, there's the 11 Club.
Yes.
And he's building
The condo.
a massive...
Oh, yes, I've heard about this.
Yeah.
You spoke with this gentleman?
I
heard
did
he's
it.
quite a character.
He's amazing, Mark Roberts.
Yes.
And he told me a great story about how 11, when they bought it, it was a really rundown strip club. Uh-huh. And they were going to get rid of it because he was trying to put together this assemblage. And everybody in the strip club world, he told me how he had to buy the strip club, and he had to buy it from this legend of the strip club world who would never sell to anyone because it was such a valuable club. And I guess this guy was on his deathbed. And so Mark sent in a friend as a kind of beard who claimed to be representing a pro athlete who just wanted to buy a strip club for a lot of money in cash. And I guess this guy happened to be terminally ill, and so he decided to sell. And so they ended up buying the club. And after they bought it, I guess everybody in the strip club world came to Miami and said, "You need to partner with us or sell it to us. This is the Gold Rush Club. If we've got, you can't just get rid of it." And that's what I guess gave them pause and made them think maybe we should make this some kind of a club and keep it. I think they were going to just knock it down and build over it. So that was
I've seen it.
That was the birth of 11. Was
Yes, I heard that he was doing a condo project, and so I wasn't clear if that really took off yet.
Yeah, I feel like that's Miami in a nutshell, from gross strip club to
condo with the name.
Yeah, to more tasteful, expensive nude club with condos above it.
Very efficient in every way. What would your advice be today to the younger you just starting out?
Oh my God. I would say maybe not to worry so much about how it's all going to work out, but I think I'm kind of a worrier by nature, so I'm not sure how much difference that would make. I don't know. I don't really have much advice for, I don't think when I meet young people that I can sort of tell them what they should do and how it's going to be. But I mean, I think you can try to help them with their work or learning their craft or what have you, and tell them about what you do and, share whatever you can with them. But I don't know. I would have said maybe I would have told myself to go into real estate, probably.
Really?
Well, it seems to be pretty lucrative.
But that's not what it's about per se for you.
I'm just teasing. I would have told myself, my wife wanted to buy an apartment in Brooklyn, like 20 something years ago.
Please, she'd be sitting on a gold mine there.
Yeah, and
she tells you that every day, I'm sure.
I said, Brooklyn it's not happening. Like, forget it. So I would have told myself to
buy the damn apartment.
Yeah.
What's your secret sauce?
Probably my looks and my charm, I would say.
Okay. What would you say is your biggest achievement or win in your career?
I don't know. I don't really have...
Writing your own book?
Well...
Perhaps that's a big deal.
Yeah. Well, it hasn't been published, so that's...
But that doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's a good thing to have done, I guess. I mean, I think there are certain things that I've done that I feel like I did a good job in journalism. Like I think I did a lot of reporting in and around Brexit in the UK, and I felt like afterwards that was really good, that I kind of captured something that maybe some other people weren't, and I, captured people that other people weren't necessarily focused on, and in a way that I think gave them dignity, but also was, also somewhat analytical and critical. But anyway, I look back and I felt like I was sort of on the right track, and that was useful and valuable and well done. And then there are other things that you look at and you think, wish I'd done that a little better. But those are probably
You seem to have a hard time giving it to yourself.
Giving what?
Giving kudos to yourself, really.
Oh, okay.
A little bit.
Maybe that's my secret sauce.
Maybe that is. It keeps you
keeps the
humble, keeps you
striving.
hungry,
Yeah.
keeps you going, never satisfied, never enough.
So looks, charm, and yeah.
Self-deprecation. It
Yes.
works. What is the favorite part of your job on the day-to-day? Let me ask that again. What is your favorite part about your job today?
Two things. I really enjoy the writing. So when I've got all the reporting and I'm really excited about a place I've been or a person I've met, and I think I just want to write this down. And when I have uninterrupted time to kind of sit and do that, I really enjoy that. And the other thing is I just love the freedom of going out and reporting somewhere. And, it's not always fun, but I mean, I went to Rome, Georgia, which is a place I would never have gone to in my life. And it was wonderful.
Was
and
it?
it's for me, it just sort of refreshes me to go to different places and
Yeah.
talk to entirely different people and try to understand, where they're coming from. And in the UK around Brexit, I went to places like East Mansfield and, South Wales and Cornwall, and I just loved it. And the more I went to one place, I would say, oh, I've, been to this part of Wales, but I haven't been to this part yet, and I really have to get there. And and that was, to me, I really enjoyed that quite a lot.
Wow. So for you, when you're not working, what are some of the things that you do to unwind and stay sane?
We have a very large dog that we adopted in COVID. So he turns, unbeknownst to us,
What breed?
He is mostly hounds, but he's a rescue. But we walk for about an hour in the morning before I go to work,
Nice,
and then maybe an hour
nice.
late afternoon. I do a lot of driving around New Jersey to travel soccer, which is, I don't know if that's relaxing, but that's just
Your thing.
where we are. And now Taekwondo and
You're doing
Girl
it?
Scouts. No,
No,
my
they-
daughter is.
yeah.
So I think last weekend or the weekend before, I was at a Taekwondo tournament in a New Jersey strip mall. It was
Amazing.
the dojo of the Immortal Dragon, which was
Of course it was.
next to a Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah, and the Cinnabon. Yeah.
And my daughter was in the tournament there. And then in the evening, I was in another part of New Jersey, a half hour away, in a bubble where my son was playing soccer. So that's kind of the way it goes.
Yeah, I'm doing that too. It's a juggle. What's your biggest vice, Josh?
I don't know. I struggle with this one. I don't really.
Cookies.
I definitely like cookies, rye. Yeah.
Rye.
Yeah.
Rye with schmaltz or rye with salmon?
No, the drinking rye. The
Okay,
yeah,
we
the
got
other
that.
rye. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Let's say rye bread, though. That probably sounds.
No,
better.
rye, the drink. Now I'm with you. Okay.
Yeah.
I was trying to make it. Thank you for coming.
Thanks
on
for
the show
having me.
today. Thanks for sharing your world. As always, a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.